Here's a quick guide to creating blend shapes in Maya. I've got a very low poly character here, and I've made some duplicates of the character's head. So I've made sure that the head is a separate object here. It's all skin weighted to the skeleton, so it moves everywhere the skeleton goes. It's got no construction history on it. The only history it's got on it is the skin weight history, and the stand model is the layer it's on here. I've then made duplicates of the head, and I've reposed them into a series of sort of facial expressions. And I've made sure, one of the things you have to make sure with blend shapes is to make sure the pivot, you don't freeze the pivot, so look, it's in the same place relative to the master shape, like so. It's also exactly the same vertex count as the original. I haven't added any vertices, otherwise it will fail to sort of recognize the relationship between the blend shapes and the master shape here. To apply the blend shapes, it's really simple. Once you've posed them all like so, you just select them, multi-select them like so, and then pick the master shape last, like so. In your rigging menu, if you go to the deform menu here at the top, is something called blend shape. If you click on the options, you don't have to change many of the default options, but you could create a name for the blend shape node, so I'll call it faces. In advanced tab, deformation order automatic. This just works out where the order of deformation history should be, because it's creating kind of, well, it is creating deformer history very similar to your skin weights. So it needs to be in the correct location so that the skin weights, the blend shapes, sorry, will follow everywhere the bone movement goes. So the facial sort of animation doesn't try to go back to where it was in its rest position. So if we apply this, and then close that window down. If we now go to the actual head mesh, underneath its history, look, there's something called faces. I've named all of these heads. So one of them is called R shape, one of them is called ooh, one's called smile, and the other one's called sad. So I can just see what they look like in here. And the envelope turns the entire group of blend shapes on and off. So if it's set to 1, it means they're active. If it's set to 0, they're not working. Invariably, you just leave that alone unless you're doing more advanced stuff. If I click on sad and I just middle drag, so press the mouse wheel left and right, you can see the blend shape works on the master shape like so. You can then hide those blend shapes away. You can actually delete them, but I wouldn't, because if you ever have to reapply them, like you make some changes to your model and so on, or you lose your history at any point, you don't want to be resculpting all of these again. So it's incredibly simple to apply those. You can apply blend shapes to pretty much any sort of polygonal shape. So for example, if I was making a more cartoony kind of head, if I create, or a cartoony mouth, for example, if I create a cylinder shape like this, these are quite good for doing this kind of thing. And if I just rotate it around 90 degrees towards the camera, like so, and I'll just zoom in on it. And I'm just going to reduce the number of spans on it, so the number of subdivisions, so I'm going to just take it down to 10, like so. And I'm going to take off all these faces here. There is a new sort of sphere shape here, but I prefer this shape. It's easier to pose. And the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to color it black, just so it stands out, so we can see it. So it's like a sort of cartoon drawn mouse. I'm just going to assign a new Lambert material to it just for now. And I'll just make sure that's black, like so, so we can see it nice and easily. And what's good about this simple low division shape, if you press the 3 key and smooth it, then it does make it into a nice sort of smooth shape. I'll just center its pivot like so, so it's dead center like so. So let's say, you know, Stan is going to be a more cartoony character with a sort of 2-dimensional mouth. So let's just get this into position like so. Let's scale it down. And we'll kind of put it into the first sort of shape it's going to be in its sort of rest position, maybe something like that. Now obviously normally when we're doing something like this, he wouldn't have a geometry mouth underneath, so this would sort of, you know, you'd make sure the polys behind are fairly flat. Okay, so that's our sort of default shape. I will make sure it's got no history on it. I will freeze its transformations, so all this data here, I will freeze that and reset it all to 0 before I start creating the blend shapes. And then I'll create some blend shapes. So Control D to duplicate, and I'll just make 3 of them. So I'm just making 3 blend shapes here, and I'll quickly pose them. I'll do this just in the front view, so it's just easier to select them. So let's have a look. Let's make this a unhappy face. That's what's not nice about this shape. It's just really easy to quickly pose, and you can spend ages doing this. And Blendshapes only pick up on component movements. So if you start scaling and shaping the whole object, it won't understand that you need to do it at a component level. So it'll pick up on that. So that's cool. And the last one, we'll just make this into like a small mouth shape. So if you do need to scale the whole thing, you need to pick all the verts and scale all the verts like that. That will do. That will do. We'll have it like that. And just like we did before, to apply the blend shapes, just pick the shapes, multi-select, and pick the master shape last, and then go to the deform menu, blend shape, call this mouths, and apply it. Close. And if we pick the original shape, we've then got under here mouths. Look, we can create these shapes that we want. So if Stan didn't have his sort of geometry mouth underneath, we could do that. And we can make adjustments to these at a later stage. So look, you can see that shape's going up a bit like that. So I could pick this in component mode and just move them down a bit. So if we then go back to this and do that mouth shape, I can't remember which one it was. It shouldn't go through his moustache. Then you see it's picked up on its new position. So that's another reason for keeping the blend shapes. You can just hide them away on a display layer. Just one last thing. Like I said, this is just a very simple, quick start to blend shapes. I would then want to parent this or skin this to this bone here. So you just do that the standard way. So let's just select that bone and skin, bone, skin, and we'll just do it as selected joints, apply. And just make sure it all works correctly, so that you need to make sure the history is in the right place. So now when I apply this blend shape, we need it to create this shape relative to the position of the bone. So let's check it does that. Yeah, it's working fine. In older versions of Maya, you just had to set up the history stack correctly so things were in the right order, because you want the blend shapes to follow where the bone goes, because it's got two lots of deformation kind of going on with it. Last things, if you are making the head a separate model, something you'll notice, let me just get rid of these, is that you get a seam kind of join around here. Now firstly, when the head is a separate model, you have to be careful when you're doing paint weights to make sure, as you can see, mine is not particularly good here. They've obviously got different weights around the neck here. So that's something I'd have to adjust. I can do this, I'll try and demonstrate quickly how we should be able to do this, and I hope this works. I'll just pick both the meshes and I'll go into my paint weights tool. So I go to rigging and I'll double click on this, and this brings up my paint weights. And what I do, I'll pick the chest influence. So I'm going to pick the chest and select that as an influence. Set these up high, and I'm hoping if I paint weights across both of them, they should all marry up into the same position, because I've got both meshes selected. So I'm painting 100% value. So all these verts here at the neck and the sort of the neck hole on the top of the torso should be exactly in the same position. And so that's all you've got to be careful of, is just make sure the skin weights for both of those are identical, so you don't get any tearing when this bone moves. So let's just have a look, just check that. That looks okay, that's not too bad, and you can spend a bit of time working on that. And the other thing is this seam. You'll pick both your meshes on a low poly model like this, and you'll do a mesh display, soften edges, and you'll still get a seam there because they're two separate objects and the vertex normals kind of are pointing in different directions. The way to resolve this, if you pick both meshes and then go into vertex mode, so I just have to start that again. The F9 key is the shortcut into vertex mode. Unfortunately, it's also a shortcut for the video capture software I'm using to make this tutorial, so it just stopped the recording. So I've managed just to select them now, and using the F9 key means that you can select the vertices across multiple meshes. It's just a little bit better than using the other shortcut. So I've got both the vertices on either side of the neck and the torso selected. If I go to mesh display, if I go to average, it should resolve it. I'll just press the F8 key, go back, and you can see that it's got the normals the same there, and it will lock those normals now, so we can still do like a mesh display, soften edges across that, and you can see that it looks like it's all one mesh now. So mesh display and average with the vertices selected on both sides of the separate meshes should kind of blend the normals together. So hopefully that will give you a basic overview of just some of the things that you might need to bear in mind when doing blend shapes.